Despite its profile as the largest economy in Africa, Nigeria is facing existential challenges to its political economic structure, which requires fresh thinking and insights. As part of its role and advocacy for a dynamic, stable, and developed economy, the leading private sector think tank, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, recently hosted the 29th edition of the annual Nigeria Economic Summit in Abuja. In his opening remarks, the chairman of the board of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Mr. Niyi Yusuf, shared why the NESG chose the theme Pathways to Sustainable Economic Transformation and Inclusion.
Hence, this year's summit has been calibrated as a burning platform to answer the question of the essential pillars of economic transformation that will get us to the future envisaged by the government. The need for urgent strategic shifts that impart the ease and the cost of doing business within a relatively short time is a matter of existential threat to the survival of enterprises and of entrepreneurs. The low access to and the increasing cost of FX, the high cost of inventory, of imported inputs and operations, coupled with the diversity of taxes, continue to erode business balance sheets with resultant contraction in production and in employment. Large firms are battling with low capacity utilization, while medium, small, and micro enterprises also grapple with multidimensional complexities. And of course, these poor economic outcomes have created worsening social conditions that cannot be taken for granted. With more than 100 million of us being multidimensionally poor, there are potentially more risks of stagnation and distress if a low growth and low investment era persists. The future of the Nigerian child is also at stake across every geopolitical zone. Also, the Nigerian aging population is equally at risk. There is a high prospect that a retiree's savings and investments will be eroded entirely within just a few years into the first or second decade of retirement. Our high fertility rate, which is driving a very high population growth, higher than our economic growth, also poses a risk of an unproductive population bulge, with an unmanageable social infrastructure cost and a huge burden for supporting our children's health, nutrition, and education. We know a multi-trillion-dollar economy is viable within a decade of serious reforms, consistent economic action, and deliberate institutional reforms. Our nation stands at a critical precipice, and our challenges demand immediate, concerted efforts. We need to act now with a shared sense of urgency.
The Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, in his welcome address said the government has commenced the review of the economic planning model in alignment with the 8-point agenda of the current administration.
Mr. President, we have commenced the process of mid-term review of the National Development Plan. The Coordinating Minister of the Economy have already secured approvals from you, and we are coordinating the review and incorporation of the renewed hope agenda, as well as the 8-point agenda into the 8 priorities area of government, into the National Development Plan. We are faithfully committed to the implementation of plans, including the Agenda 2050, because it is an irreducible minimum of commitment to some consensus by all, especially in a federal setup like Nigeria, which you have always believed, but which you have always led that should be recognized as such. We are a nation where in every financial year, at least 800 public budgets are presented, 774 in the different local governments, 36 budgets in the states, and FCT, as well as the federal government. So there is an irreducible minimum of policy linkage and coordination that is required in order for this to deliver the promises that Nigerians hope for. Particularly, again, these are plans and policies that every time the private sector at lower levels and higher levels of our corporate oneness look at for direction or for complementarity or for seriousness, therefore underscoring the need to ensure that at a minimum, some irreducible.
Speaking on the strategic options for the Nigerian economy to attain inclusion and development, the Vice-Chairperson of the NESG, Ms. Amina Maina, gave an overview of the journey of the Nigerian economy and expectations.
The Next 29 Summit, themed The Pathways to Sustainable Economic Transformation and Inclusion, is a pivotal platform to bring together stakeholders to deliberate, to discuss, and to find ways forward and how we can move our country forward. The coming together to present or deliberate has been done with stakeholders, not just from the private sector, but from public sector, from the diplomatic corps, academia, civil societies. The graph we have on the screen depicts where we are as a nation, where we were also as a nation. You would recall that I did mention that we were a very high-growing nation, but today, I think the graph speaks for itself. We've gone from being a high-benefit economic activity nation to one which is plowed by inflation and all the benefits of the economic activities which we should be reaping somehow has eroded us. And we're really at a point where it's a conversation that must take place. We believe that the NESG, together with government, must come up with solutions. We must think outside the box to get our country back in the right trajectory. Needless to say that even if we speak and dream and talk about whatever it is that we want to do, without a willing government at the center of the events, this will not be possible. Today, Mr. President, you sit at the helm of affairs as a willing reformer. And you sit at the helm of affairs as a willing reformer, sir. And we believe that our nation can get to a $4 trillion economy by the year 2035. As at the end of the year 2020, the Nigerian economy was a $450 billion economy. We have heard through the plans of the government, through their renewed hope agenda, how they plan to double the economy every 4 years to get to a $1 trillion economy. Additionally, if we go by the 2050 vision, the plan is to be at $3 trillion by the year 2035. But we do believe at the NESG that with the right pathways, which we will be reviewing today, we can actually get to $4 trillion. And of course, this is more so because we believe that we have a government now that we can dialogue with, that we can partner with, that we can speak to, and we can find solutions from the private sector, not just from a public sector point of view, but particularly from private sector, because we in this room are the people who feel the punch and are the face of the everyday Nigerians.
Giving his special address at the event, President Bola Tinubu lauded the efforts of the NESG over the years in supporting reforms that can move the economy forward. He assured the private sector that his administration will address critical issues like the foreign exchange forwards contracts backlogs and provide an enabling environment for them to thrive.
Consistent with our commitment to enshrine fairness and the rule of law in our country, this government will uphold the sanctity of every legitimate contract. Specifically as it relates to foreign exchange obligations of the government, all the forward contracts that the government has entered into will be honored. I believe in the definition of our profession that I inherit the asset and liability of my predecessor. The framework has been put in place to ensure that these obligations are met in due course. My government is not blind to the challenges several of you are facing in the financial markets. I can only allay these concerns by revealing that we have a good line of sight for the additional foreign exchange liquidity that is required to restore market confidence. And we are going to do that. Further details elaborating on the specific of this far-ranging initiative to deepen foreign exchange liquidity and improve confidence across all stakeholders will be shared by the coordinating Minister of Economy and the Governor, Central Bank of Nigeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a $1 trillion economy is possible. By year 2026. And a $3 trillion economy is also possible within this decade. We can do it with double-digit, inclusive, and sustainable competitive growth. This is our agenda. I would like to charge you, the captains of industry here present, to commit yourself and redouble your effort to our vision of a renewed hope, more prosperous Nigeria, a better Nigeria for all. For us to successfully deliver our promise to Nigerians, we recognize that it is imperative that we foster a high collaborative relationship with private sector. We must work together. We have the proven capacity in this regard. As we remember the role of public-private partnership and the transformation of Lagos State under my leadership, we will replicate that across Nigeria with our unwavering support.
The opening plenary session of the conference also featured a ministerial conversation with Mr. Wale Edun, Coordinating Minister of Economy, Alhaji Sabi Abdullahi, Minister of State Agriculture, giving an insight into the government policy and framework alongside the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Atiku Bagudu.
In terms of the economy, the priority areas are there, and they all boil down to improving livelihoods, delivering economic outcomes, the human resources aspect, and of course, a fairer and more level playing field, particularly for young people to express themselves, as we had the opportunity in our days. But there are enough brilliant people here that no matter what the conditions, they will excel. In order to provide the platform for the priority areas, the first thing that is happening is economic stabilization, focusing on, first of all, the fiscal side, revenues from various sources, the traditional sources, oil, but also taxation and so forth.
You heard when the president said you inherit both assets and liabilities. One asset that we inherited is the Agenda 2050, which was put together by the private sector, public sector, civil society organizations. And on the back of that Agenda 2050, which is our vision of where we want to be by 2050, a series of national development plans were 5-year each were planned. So the first one is the 2021 to 2025. Of course, after that is the medium-term expenditure framework, which is a 3-year medium-term framework that is always provided by the government, as well as the 1-year plan, which is the budget. So the first thing is, Mr. President, in the institutional alignment, brought both the 1-year planning and this medium and long-term plans in one place. And secondly, these plans were drawn in appreciation of the fact that we are a federation. So there are, and this federation and the ingredient of the federation actually and the planning drive itself from the Constitution. We have an organ called the National Economic Council, which is the federating units meeting quite often monthly in order to discuss economic affairs and align planning.
Now, like you rightly said, food is key. And I'm sure from morning till now, most people probably here must have had their breakfast. And if they've not had their breakfast, they will have been thinking of food in the next couple of minutes or hours. So food is key. Now, for us in the ministry, the agricultural sector is facing very serious challenges. And I think the first challenge, like we all know, is the fact that we're having low productivity in terms of most of our food security crops. A situation where farmers in some other climes are getting double what our farmers are getting here is something we consider unacceptable. Now, the second challenge is the fact that we have, flooding. The impact of climate change, like we all know, desertification from the north, flooding in the middle, and coastal erosion in the south, which the president aptly put when he attended the UN General Assembly. Now, for us in the ministry, we realize there is serious inflation, food inflation. The cost of food have gone up, perhaps because of the initial shock of the removal of fuel subsidy. A lot are not in place. So what we have done is the next opportunity available to us. The rainy season is almost gone, but the dry season, for which Nigeria has very tremendous potentials on, we decide we have to focus on it. And I'm happy to say that for the dry season program, we are starting with wheat, rice, rice, and then soybean and vegetables. That is various tomatoes and all the other leaf vegetables. Now, what we realize is that for the farmer, what are their challenges? Their key challenges usually is the input. And apart from input, sometimes some of the programs we have, when they are not properly targeted, they end up being taken over by what we call briefcase farmers. Immediately we announced that we are having a dry season program. We've received several proposals from people who never own farm, and we are worried. So that explains why in the ministry we've decided we need to go back to basics. And I think 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Agriculture, my brother Senator Abubakar, was in Jigawa State. Fortunately, the Jigawa State governor is here. He's giving us very tremendous support for the wheat program. And I think Jigawa State is offering us 40,000 hectares of land. I think it's even more now from the field visit. So what we are doing in the ministry is we realize agriculture is done on the land. So no more paper agriculture, no more computer-dressed agriculture. We want to get down to where the farmers are.
Dr. Yemi Cardoso, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, also provided some perspective on the monetary policy activities and the foreign exchange market.
The last thing I would want to do is talk about foreign exchange and the foreign exchange market in isolation. If I did this, I would be shortchanging the narrative. And if I could just crave your indulgence to say a few things, and then I will try and address the questions you asked. Now, happily, we have a situation where the bleeding with respect to Nigeria's resources have stopped. And I refer specifically to the subsidy. And to be honest, when people say they are concerned, yeah, I get it. But frankly, I think that was a time to be concerned. Right now, from what I can see, we are on the path of rebuilding. And that is so important for us on the monetary side. If the fiscal is bleeding, it makes life very difficult for us on the monetary side. So to the extent that that has stopped, yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It isn't anything for anybody to take lightly. It isn't. This is something that we've tried to do for successive years and failed. And the result of not doing it, we've all seen. We've all seen it. And now, suddenly, it has stopped. In addition to that, the attempt at unification of the foreign exchange market, fine, not by any means perfect, but at least substantial more revenues have come in.
A major takeaway from the two-day summit is the need for transparency and accountability in the public-private partnership between the NESG and the federal government. Policy alignment and the right signaling from the fiscal and monetary authorities will definitely spur more private sector investments to move Nigeria's economy towards the path of sustainable development.